All right. So, welcome everybody. My name is Hayo, and I will be hosting our informal book launch today. We are recording this session, so some of you will be participating live, and some of you will be watching it later. Either way, we're very happy that you are here. We haven't actually got our own copy of the book yet, but we are just told by Chun, one of the editors, that she has received her actual copy, so we can confirm that the book is real. Chun, would you just like to hold it up?
Sure.
Look at that beauty. What a gorgeous book. It exists after such a long time. So, first of all, I'd like to just introduce my two wonderful co-editors, Pia Sundqvist and Chun Lai. Pia, would you like to just say hi and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, so I'm Pia Sundqvist at the University of Oslo. I'm originally from Sweden. I'm very happy to be part of this project. I've never edited an international book before, so this was the first time for me, and it's been truly an enjoyable experience. So thanks a lot. And we did it all during COVID. I think that's very good. Yeah.
Exactly. And Chun Lai, the third editor.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chun Lai. I'm from University of Hong Kong, and it has been a great learning journey editing this book together, working with the authors and the two editors. Very enjoyable experience.
Yeah, and I have to say, I don't think I've done that formally, but a huge thank you to Pia and Chun for being amazing co-editors. I edited a book once with a colleague, Stephen Ryan, and he said, if you can do something as complicated as editing, a volume with so many chapters and still come out at the other end being friends, then that's a real achievement, because it can be quite frustrating at times and so on. But Chun and Pia have been absolutely amazing to work with, as have all of our 50 plus authors. We have a huge number of authors, and they have been absolutely wonderful, very patient throughout the whole process, with all the delays because of COVID and things like that. So it's been really great. We have two of our authors here with us live, Shannon Sauro and Silvia Kunitz. And so welcome to you both. Shannon, could you say hi and just introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Sauro, and I'm based at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, so I guess I add a little bit of international flavor. But right now, I'm not in Baltimore. I'm in Malmö, Sweden, so I'm in the same time zone as a number of people here, so this is not at a weird time.
Yeah, I felt bad for some of our authors from North America, because especially, Eastern Seaboard is like, 3 o'clock in the morning now or some crazy time. So they're going to have to watch the recording later. Thank you, Shannon. Silvia.
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Silvia, and I'm based in Sweden at the moment, and in transition between university, but soon to be based in Linköping University.
Nice. And is that the first time to work there?
In Linköping, yes.
Nice. Very exciting. Very exciting. So, as you can see behind me, this is a little collage that we made of the gloriously beautiful authors of our project. As I said, there's about 50, no, actually more than 50 there. And it's just wonderful to see it all come together. Some of them are in the audience right now. Just to let you know, if you are one of the audience members, you can communicate using the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. We can see that, and we can respond to you there. Hi, Vivian, and hi, Joe. Joe is one of our authors as well. So this is the actual moment whereby we launch our book, and just in the nick of time, we have one more author, Liam.
What an appearance!
Not man of the hour, man of the minute. There we go. Welcome, Liam. Liam is also one of the
technical feature there. Apologies
we've just done
to you all.
So perfect timing. Liam, would you like to say hi and Tell us who you are.
Hi, it's Liam Murray from the University of Limerick here, one of the writers of the chapter, and with several others. My colleagues, so another Silvia, Benini, Martin Mullen, and Marta Giralt. So they should be in the audience or thereabouts. Hello, everyone. Apologies.
Wonderful to have you here. That's excellent. So you're representing, was it four yourself and three other authors of your chapter, correct? Yeah, excellent. So as we were just saying, as we were starting, Chun was the first one to have arrived, has received a copy of the book. Pia and I haven't even seen it yet, but it's very exciting. So this is the moment where we do the drum roll and the actual, launch of the book, and then we all cheer. And Chun, can you just hold it up one more time? Look at that! What a beauty! Yeah, there we go. So now it's official, everybody. After Pia, how long did it take? Or Chun, can you remember when we started?
Yeah, I think the call went out in January 2020. I think like 2 or 3 weeks before hell broke loose. So yeah, but it's been 2.5 years. Not too much delay, actually.
Not too bad. But yeah, well over 2 years. Our timing was impeccable. Just before COVID. I mean, we're amazing. So for those of you who haven't participated as one of the authors for the book, it's a handbook published by Routledge. As you may or may not know, Routledge has a whole series of handbooks, and they all aim to kind of provide a comprehensive overview of a particular field at a specific moment in time. So sort of like a state of the art, what do we know, where are we at in this particular domain? And so the aim of the handbook is to really bring together a sort of a cross-section of all the different subfields and subdisciplines that make up that particular domain. Now, you probably can't read what's behind me, but we'll upload that later, the table of contents along with the video recording. But what you can see here is just the number of chapters. I think we had, Pia, Chun, do you remember how many chapters we had? Like 30, was it?
30 in total, I suppose.
30 chapters, I think, yeah. So we divided it up into 3 parts, just because of the nature of this field, and we'll talk about this a little bit with our authors in a moment. But as you know, if you're listening here, you'll have an interest in this area, so you'll probably know that it's relatively new as a field. There has been research activity over the years in areas of learning and supporting learners outside the classroom, but as a dedicated field of study, it's really relatively recent. So we decided that the first part of our handbook should really be to map this field. So I don't know if you can see that on the screen behind me, but the first of 3 parts of the handbook is really essentially just asking authors to describe from different perspectives, theoretical, pedagogical, epistemological, what is this field? How do we define it? What does it include? What does it not include? And I think this is a very important and valuable contribution that the authors make here. So we've got Jonathan Reinhardt, Phil Benson, Stephen Thorne, John Halloman, Søren Eskildsen, and I can't read the rest on my screen because it's dropped up at the bottom, but we have a very nice collection of about 8 chapters, if I remember correctly, in that section. Yeah, 8 chapters. Oh, here we go. We've got your chapter, Liam. We'll talk about that in a moment, a little bit. Cynthia Lee and Elke Peters. And then part 2 is where we focus more on the pedagogical side. We obviously don't call this teaching, as you would imagine. We call it supporting learning beyond the classroom, and so it could be in a formal way, sort of originating from the classroom, or it could be by supporting learners as they are engaging in learning beyond the classroom. And there's some really excellent chapters in this part talking about the use, for example, digital games by Charles Schultz, how to support learners' self-regulation outside the classroom, Olga Wiberg and Kukulska Home. Lena Lee, Martin Howard, Silvia, your chapter's in there. Pia, maybe you can help me with the pronunciation of Arya's name.
Whose name?
Arya. Pirainen? How do you say that?
Pirainen Marsh.
Oh, Arya Pirainen Marsh. Sorry.
Pirainen Marsh. Okay,
Arya Pirainen Marsh. Yeah.
I wasn't going to try that. Kevin Y, Ho Young, and Chen Xie and colleagues, and then of course Joe Meinard and Satoko Kato. Joe is in the audience, which is lovely. Wenli Wu and Tingma, David Gardner and Tony Berner. And then the third and final part of the handbook is researching. So how do we investigate this? What are some of the tools that we have available to us? Which, many of which, of course, as you can imagine, are very different from what you would do in a classroom environment, where things are a lot easier in some ways to perhaps control and observe and so on. And again, excellent chapters here. Now, I always thought this was pronounced Liz, Kirsten, Sylvain, but then when I was in Oslo with Pia a couple of weeks ago, she didn't even recognize what I was talking
he was
about.
way off with his pronunciation. It's Liz, Kerstin, Sylvain.
Yes.
Liz, just, I might even try that. But yeah, wonderful chapter by Liz. Jisong Lee, Shannon, of course, Lisbeth Brevik, and Nils Buchholz, Kathy Bailey, Senior Hannibal Jensen, Anastasia Rothoni, Matt Smith, Howard Scott, and John Traxler, Peter Wilkström, and Marie Nilsberg, and Michael Thomas. So yeah, really, really awesome collection of authors. I think we've been very lucky. Basically, initially when we started, and Pia and Chun, correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of drew up a list of, the ideal people who we would love to have involved in the project, and I don't think anyone said no. Am I right?
Correct.
I think maybe with a little bit of arm twisting and a few gentle threats.
You're all very persuasive as editors, would you say?
Yeah, right, Shannon?
Extremely.
But we got everybody that we that we were hoping would contribute. So we're so very, very grateful to that.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks to all the authors. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So let's have a little bit of an informal conversation, especially now that we have three representatives of the three parts of the book here. And Pia and Chun, feel free to chip in and ask additional questions or comments. But starting using the format of our book, that first part, mapping learning beyond the classroom. Would any one of you feel brave enough to, very briefly, kind of, in your view, in your opinion, tell us where does learning beyond the classroom begin and where does it end? What is it? Just to start off with a really easy question. Maybe you would like to do it, Liam, because you came last. So
Yeah, give it to Liam. He's in part one of the book.
I'm going to volunteer
Exactly.
Shannon there because I quote Shannon so much. It begins as soon as you leave the classroom. I believe it's, when students are taught, that's what was missing during COVID. When students were having that informal learning, walking out of the lecture theatre, out of the tutorial and talking to each other, and asking questions of each other, so I think it begins then, beyond the classroom, immediately out of that, and certainly over the past 2 years, much like the book, everyone's been changing, and for the better, for the good, I don't know, we're seeing a mixed final semester here anyway, which must have echoes in other teaching context, but good and bad, but one key thing that we concentrate on is motivation, and it lies at the heart of this, and is there extra motivation needed? One beyond the classroom. One point I'd like this little memoriam of our dear great researcher Zoltan Dornier, who passed last Friday. A little remembrance of him there. Hope his work continues, But with quoting Zoltan, I mean, extrinsic, intrinsic motivation are still there to be explored, and of particular importance beyond the classroom. Our students have changed. Our students, we have problems in third level education about accommodation, about, funding, about students working and seeing this as a part-time work and being able to study in the evenings because, wait for it, all the materials are there online on our VLEs, So there's different evolution, shall we say, of motivation that need to be tackled here. And I think our importance of the book is it allows this conversation to get started. It's very important that not just our chapter, but I mean, there's so many great ideas within the book. It was a real pleasure, and thanks to the editors for real great feedback that we got. To help with several authors and ours, and there were conflicting, shall we say, arguments. An open and fresh exchange of views happened frequently. We have caveats, yes. We have worries, but we're cautiously optimistic, about beyond the classroom, in ways of tackling emerging problems, but on perennial problems about student motivation, about student workloads, about those. So I think this opens a new, relatively new, Shannon's been doing it for a while, as you've all, but relatively new areas of research, of important research, because we adore it, because we're applied linguists, We don't live in theories, although some were quite good. We live in the applied worlds, I like it. It's an emerging theory, but
my whole life is an emerging theory.
I'll shut up now. Shannon, you were going to say something.
I'll jump in here and go back to that first question, because I was thinking how the question of where does it begin, and I thought it's not, in my mind, it begins online, but it begins with the learner, and we don't always think of ourselves as a learner. So it's kind of when you transition, and thinking back to the pandemic, I don't know about the rest of you, but I was very much online. And we see that in spaces where people will go into online communities, maybe for co-membership, or they like a thing, my love of fan spaces, so these affinity groups. But at some point, you might see a shift where the intentionality of what you're doing morphs so that you are there to learn something new, whether it's a language or a skill or communication strategies or some other personal development. So we can see people maybe in their offline persona, they don't identify as a learner or a student because that's not what they're doing, but in these other spaces, that is who they become. And so that's where I would define it. It's like in the intentionality of the individual when that shift happens.
I like that. That's a very nice way of framing it. The intentionality of the learner. So then that means, correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, that learning beyond the classroom can also happen within the classroom.
I think we do see that. I mean, I noticed here when I was teaching in Sweden, just the number of students who were students, but how rich their lives were in learning beyond the classroom that had nothing to do with what they were required to do for class. It had to do with their interest. They love K-pop, so they were hanging out learning Korean so that they could, talk with other members of the BTS ARMY fan community or something.
My daughter is 9 years old, and she's half Korean, half Dutch, and of course 100% Kiwi growing up in New Zealand. She loves, obviously, K-pop, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I have to watch endless videos of well-groomed 16-year-old boys, which I have a tremendous amount of interest in, but there's a lot of learning that's going on outside that particular classroom. So you mentioned this notion of intentionality, Lee, and you've talked about motivation and especially also the importance of you're thinking about that and its importance. It's even perhaps greater importance outside the classroom than in the classroom, because you, as a learner, have to be more self-reliant. But of course, as teachers, as facilitators, as advisors, as self-access staff, you do have a role to play in preparing learners for that initially, and then, of course, once they're in that, providing ongoing support. Silvia, your chapter is, of course, in the second part of the book, and I know that you talk about a specific context dealing with migrants and so on, but I'm sure you have some thoughts about, especially for people in our audience, Like, if you are working in a classroom environment, how can you start to think about the stuff outside the classroom?
Well, I mean, I think as a language teacher myself, I would say that the most important thing is to know your learners. So you have to figure out what is interesting for them and what kind of communicative needs they might have outside the classroom. So it's not just about knowing, open the page book 5. It might have to deal with how much is this and ordering the proper kind of coffee that you want to have or not, and so on. So I think for me, from a teaching perspective, is really about trying to understand the life experiences in which our learners live, and try to make sure that, with our teaching, we can support them. So that's my take on that. And of course, in my case, it helped that, a bunch of my friends and colleagues working with conversation analysis, they were studying language learning in the wild, which sounded fantastic. And so, of course, and some of them are of course, authors in the books, in the book as well. So.
Yeah, nice. And talking about wilds, Liam, in your chapter with your colleagues, you actually, it's in your title, isn't it? Coal in the Wild, a voyage of independent self-directed learning. That sounds very exciting. So can you tell us a little bit about what that voyage looks like?
Yeah, it was the proof, okay, that the environment, which was forced learning. The C word, the confinement, forced our students to learn online. Okay, well, let's do a study during this time to see if they can become what we'd always hoped that they would become. These autonomous, or more, can you be more autonomous or less autonomous? More autonomous, more self-directed, taking on more responsibility for their own learning. And guess what? After our study, it proved they can be. But for years we've been uncertain. We tried. Are they totally? There were too many variables, etc., etc. Well, we reduced the variables because everybody was online. Was it lack of choice? Yeah. Was it this forced learning? You always have choice. But then we started using the F word a lot. This forced learning and the different reactions there, both from the teachers and tutors, language tutors, and from ourselves and from the students. How do we engage? How do we keep the motivation going? And in our study, we wanted to do it. So, well, what's in the wild here? What's happening here? We were forced. One of the effects of COVID was we were forced to let go a little bit more. Lack of control was forcing us. We all jumped into Zoom and in MS Teams or whatever. A lot of us felt we'd lost control. More control, not total control. We can't help it. So it was a maelstrom of emotions and many, many different approaches used there. And the book is very fortuitous in the timing, as you mentioned earlier, which allowed us to explore these. And we brought in other elements of our research, critical digital literacies and helping those, all towards the aim of self-directed learning, autonomous. Well, they got to be strong enough, and these are before you're throwing them out in the wild, before you're inviting them into the wild. That was our major point, because we're still, and we mentioned it in Martin mentioned his section of it. The Irish system is spoon feeding. From the day they're born, potatoes are spoon fed. Not the day after they're born, they start getting spoon fed, and that's it till the age of 18. It's heavily intensive like that, It's national headlines when they're having their leaving cert, their baccalaureate, their final pieces. It's heavy spoon feeding here, and extra classes and paying for extramural teaching, etc., etc. And then they go to university, and we ignore them, and we're not holding their hands, and there's a big transition in the first year. Yeah. And I think learning beyond the classroom's got a lot to play with that. As I say, definitely our learners are changing, their expectations are changing. And there's things that we cannot control, such as accommodation. There's this strange movement of students feeling they have to get part-time jobs. It's not just here at the University of Limerick, it's other colleges as well. And what do we do? Okay, well, we bring them back to basics and say, well, our goal is to create, by the time you graduate, you have to be an autonomous learner. Yeah, fully independent, self-directed, knowing what you want. And they're 18, not really, 19, 20, you know? I feel in the wild is perfect for MA students. We've had discussions with the MAs, but we're teaching on MA TESOL programs, international applied linguistics programs, and it's perfect for them, of course. You know, you would expect them to be autonomous learners, wouldn't you? By the time they're at MA levels, you can have those conversations. But the undergraduate mindset in getting them towards the autonomous, ready for the wild, exploring the wild, finding their voice to speak in the wild. We introduce them to various, like Shannon does, you know, fan bases or whichever online environment, quiet and shy, or anonymous. You know, make them anonymous and they'll never shut up, you know, if it's their own. You know what I mean?
So just following on from this notion of wilds, I'm just putting behind me, and if you can read it, this quote, I also tweeted it out last week from Jonathan Reinhardt's from the first chapter in the mapping part, which I think is such a great quote. The word wilds is interesting as it implies that formal education tames, domesticates, or enculturates what is otherwise natural. And the history of language learning and teaching beyond the classroom seems to be typified by the periodic unleashing of wild technology-mediated behavior that must somehow be tamed or at least accommodated in classrooms. Any response to that?
Totally agree. Totally agree.
I
Shannon,
use the
come
term
on. I'm sure you've got an opinion on that.
I do. I mean, obviously, I have to give a shout out not only to Steve Thorne, but also to my great collaborator, Katerina Zero. We spent some time unpacking and thinking about the digital wilds and what language learning in the digital wilds was. But what I also see as a teacher trainer and a language teacher myself is, exactly this desire sometimes to domesticate sounds a little bit like you're taking the joy and the fierceness out of the fun. But we might say like harnessing. I like that word a little bit better. You're harnessing that energy and that interest and passion and finding a way to channel it into the formal classroom context. I know that is something that I've definitely tried doing, and I've tried to help my own students, whether in Sweden or the United States. And it's very different contexts, but what I found so far holds true is, you know, our students, the learners in our classrooms have rich lives and passion, most of them. I mean, I think we can't speak of universals. I've encountered that as well. But many of them are happy when they can find a way to draw upon and harness that fiercely playful, interested, motivated side of themselves. There is a lot of desire to learn in people. I've seen this. And so if there's a way you can harness that, and I think looking to the wilds is one way of going, how can we bring this in? Maybe it's a little Jurassic Park, you know, it's still a little dangerous.
I like that.
Okay, that's the title of our next book.
A little Jurassic Park, that's,
A little Jurassic Park, yeah.
But if I can add something, I think that, you know, Shannon mentioned teacher education, and I think it's really important, to give our own students who are going to be teachers the kind of experience that we want them to be able to offer to their own students. So I think that's really crucial, especially in a way in teacher education.
Absolutely, yep. That's a really good point, because, you know, a lot of this we can have all these ideas, but, you know, most of us here have been working in this field for, you know, as long as we can remember. And so it's second nature to us. But, you know, if you are a, 23, 24-year-old person who's been educated recently outside of this tradition, this way of thinking, it can be very alien and quite scary. I mean, this whole idea of, teaching in the wilds, that doesn't sound very safe, And then you've got these funny people like Shannon starting to talk about teaching in Jurassic Park and things like that. I mean, we have a few people in the audience, and so just a reminder that there is a chat, and so please do ask us any questions for anyone here on the panel, or any just general comments, if you want to tell us how wonderful the book is or whatever, we're always ready for compliments. No problem. So definitely use that chat. We keep an eye on it. So, yeah. Pia, just on a sort of a personal, I mentioned that, you know, we here are all kind of very familiar with this field, but where did your original interest in learning beyond the classroom come from?
Is that to all of us?
No,
that
that's
question?
for you. Because I don't think I've ever asked you.
Pia?
Well, I certainly know where my interest come from, because I used to teach senior high school level and junior high school level, and I just I just figured out that, okay, they knew so much English that I never ever taught them in the classroom. And so this was back in the 90s, so I just asked them, you know, how come you're so good at English? And they had all sorts of answers, these, you know, 14-year-olds. And it was soap operas, and it was later on lots of games. The Bold and the Beautiful in the 90s. I mean, they just watched everything. And so when I returned to university, I was just curious to find out whether, you know, what are they doing out there? And we're talking about teenagers. That was my focus group, so not tertiary levels. I was with the younger ones. And yes, I mean, as we know, they do learn from this. And talking about what you were, you know, motivation. Their motivation is, of course, not necessarily English. It's just that they are interested in something, as we've been talking about. And then it's incidental, of course, that they learn. But then some actually do, you know, on purpose also engage in these activities because they want to learn, but they are few. So mainly it's incidental learning. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
and you've done a lot of work in the area of games, and Shannon, you're done a lot of work in the area of fan fiction, and Silvia, your angle is a little bit different because you're looking a lot at migrant groups, right? And I think it's yes. something that I briefly wanted to talk about, because for people who do not work in that space, it's something that perhaps they don't necessarily associate with learning beyond the classroom, you know. But of course, for a lot of people, this idea of learning beyond the classroom is not an option. It's a necessity, especially for people who are transient. So can you just, especially for the benefit of people in the audience who may not be familiar with this element of learning beyond the classroom, just tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so I mean, the way I got specifically involved with sort of studying migration context is because of a research project on language cafes for migrants. And basically this was a very sort of spontaneous response that some associations in Sweden had, because essentially the state-funded courses could not cope with the big migration influx. And so it was, you know, you have all these people coming to Sweden in this case, but to any other countries, of course. And, you know, they have, you know, real life communicative needs. They need to figure out important things. The stakes are tremendously high for them. And they need to have spaces where they can sort of learn, but also practice and socialize with other members of the community. And one of the issues also is that typically, you know, in the state-funded programs, they don't really have access to. They have access to other migrants with the same problems, but they don't really get a chance to socialize with local competent members of the community, whether they have a migrant background or not. So it's really important to give them the possibility to actually engage, you know, locally, to feel that they are members of the new community. And of course, language is instrumental in that sense. But it should also, you know, the idea is that, you know, for example, in the case of these language cafes, but there are many other initiatives, the idea is to offer somehow safe spaces where they can, I'm really trying not to use the word practice, because I don't want to say that they need to practice their language, they need to use their language in a way that allows them to really feel part of, you know, this new life, this new world, even if it's for just a short amount of time. So,
Yeah, that's a very, very powerful thing to remember. And let's also not forget that there are still 800 million people on the planet or thereabouts who do not have access to regular schooling. And so, learning beyond the classroom for them is a very harsh reality, not a compliment, not an option. It's daily life. And personally, one of my next question is going to be about, where are we going next as a field, as a discipline. Personally, I'd like to see more efforts, in terms of reaching out and using the collective wisdom that we're building up in our discipline to reach out to communities who are more, I think, can benefit a lot from what we've learned about what works for learners when they are not constantly supported by or looked after by teachers. What kinds of resources could we make available? What kinds of things do learners like when they are not prescribed? And think about ways of harnessing, to use Shannon's word, harnessing all that knowledge and those resources and make them available in other ways to reach those very, very, very many people for whom learning beyond the classroom is a daily necessity. So that leads me into the next question. This is a question for everyone, so maybe we can get more than one response. But from your own perspective, what's next for learning beyond the classroom? What do you see as the kind of, shall we say, the biggest opportunities in the next 3 to 5, 7 years? Easy question, right?
Very easy. Can I evade the question and sort of answer it, but not entirely?
As usual.
Hey,
That's very political.
I was thinking about projections, so it is related in this regard, and I want to mention it was something I was thinking about while writing this chapter, because it was affecting us. So I was looking more at research methods, but I've spent time looking at the chapter by the author here that we mentioned earlier, Kerstin Sylvain, who is also looking at ethics around doing this kind of research. And what I see happening to all of us in teaching, again, with this intense shift to emergency online instruction, there was this normalization of certain digital tools that was dumped on a lot of people who had to, play catch up, right? There was a lot of, building the plane as you were flying it going on for many. And in response, the technology also adapted to make things more, I want to say, accessible. That was the thing that we heard, like how you would have captioning or how you could have transcription. And this all relates to some lovely tools that have come out to help with, we might say, data collection in the digital world or beyond the classroom, but that has also brought in other ethical concerns. And Sylvain's chapter addresses one where she talks about, of course, I guess we might say legislation, like the GDPR in Europe, and how privacy rules in certain countries may change what we've been free to do in the wilds now that it has become more normalized, and they're more, now that we're using AI tools to kind of transcribe for us, but where is that data being stored? And then in my own chapter, I was talking about the challenge, and I want to shout out to Elon Musk now, not because I'm a fan of his, but because recent conversations on Twitter have also led to what I saw in other spaces in communities where we would do research, and that is a threatened community when policies change or ownership changes that can lead to an exodus of those spaces where the language learning is happening. So if as a researcher, you find yourself in a community that suddenly gets sold to a company that has very different privacy beliefs, or maybe a political agenda where they want to shut down people like you, then there's a breakup of that community and also a loss of that learning. And so that is also a challenge for researchers. So I guess that's what I'm saying. We're going to continue to see more of this is the problem with wilds. It's not a problem. It's inherent that things are not fixed. And that poses a challenge as we try to keep up, because we can't always. And so we'll sometimes lose some histories, but things will reconstruct somewhere else on a different platform. and with different populations. But it's going to be a game of like chasing through the wilds. I see.
Excellent.
I think you're absolutely right. Hey, there's huge opportunities here as we exit I was going to say post-COVID, but we are now experiencing a spike of another variant in Ireland, So, but I think it does give us this opportunity to rethink what we've been doing. A lot of my colleagues, the neo-Luddites to the pioneers have been through an experience. They've been through blended learning and totally immersed online learning. People have changed. Students have changed. Yeah, absolutely. So, it's emboldened some to try new things. It has quietened some down a little bit. So it's strange. After all these years of attempting to proselytize these colleagues, now the irony is, hold on, hold it back a bit. We did have that conversation amongst our staff about, try it and see. The expression of suck it and see, if you like it, try it now. You've got to be, strong enough to try it. And if it fails, to quote the great, playwright Ireland, Beckett, if it fails, fail better next time. Try it.
Like it.
And this is what I've been encouraging our staff now as the head of department, have that freedom to try it. Try that 1 hour, whatever. I'm deliberately not giving examples here because I don't want to prejudice you in any way, but with and without technology, what's the role of technology? What are our learners now after 2 years? With this year we had angry fourth years because their undergraduate has gone. 2 years have been stolen away from them. We've got the third years who are angry because they were doing Erasmus or didn't do Erasmus. They're out on co-op, etc. Second years who've known no university life really, apart from a blended one. And first years who, were different. So each approach for each year must be different. So you're right here. There's huge opportunities here to rediscover our learners, rediscover ourselves, and see where we want to go with and without technologies. I
think that's a really good point. We don't want learning beyond the classroom to become equated with learning with technology. No. Yes, technology often plays a role, obviously, but not exclusively. It's primarily a pedagogical paradigm, not a technological one, right?
Yes. If anything, it's reinforced. Yeah, it's reminding me of the importance of, the immersion of a big fan of Erasmus. I was an Erasmus coordinator for 16 years here, but a big fan of that immersive. Here in Ireland, we're immersed in English with a sprinkling of Gaelic. It's getting more multilingual, but really, the heavy weight of English is there, But so that's why I adore the Erasmus, where students change. They actually, their personalities change, and they're so much more confident when they come back after having been away from the ivory tower. Halfway through their second year, and they come back, and you can see the changes within them. It doesn't work for all of them, but it does change. It reminds me. Well, there's the wilds of Erasmus land where they're living, speaking, employing, and using, as you were saying, Silvia. They're using the language there, and they're not forced to do it. The expectation is there,
Well, it's language learning beyond the classroom, but of course, a lot of the benefits of language learning beyond the classroom is things unrelated or not directly related to language, right? That's one of the huge strengths, and the language is often almost incidental in a way, and that's a very powerful aspect of it, right? Silvia, absolutely. Pia, any thoughts on what's next?
Should I go? You go, Pia?
Yeah, sure. Go. No, go ahead.
No, at the cost of repeating myself, but I am a little worried about the classroom and beyond the classroom becoming two very separate things, two very separate worlds. Or as just Liam has said, the ivory tower and the wilds. So what I am hoping for the field, I don't know whether this is where the field is going, but what I'm hoping is for, whatever research is being done, whatever we know about language learning beyond the classroom, to inform what is happening in the classroom somehow, so that, you know, the two and again, I want to say the two worlds, because that is the risk a little bit, that, you know, there's going to be some sort of an opposition between the classroom and beyond the classroom, everything else. So I'm hoping for an integration of these two aspects, because, I mean, we want our students we want language learners, language users in general, to have sort of integrated experiences somehow. So, yeah.
I like that a lot. I mean, the integration, that's something that I think all of us here have been talking about and writing about for so long, right? Because we can see the benefits of what happens outside the classroom. We see the benefits of that for the classroom, but we can also see the benefits of what happens in the class and so on. So it's this constant kind of exchange, which we definitely don't want to lose. So maybe a blending of the ivory tower with, well, what's the opposite of the ivory? Maybe a chocolate tower?
I like that one.
Yeah, that could be another title for another book. What do you think?
Better than Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
I like the Jurassic Park. Maybe I can pick up on that. This, you know, what you were talking. We've been talking about bridging the gap, from outside and inside and so forth. But in the future, what sort of scares me a little bit is what Liz Kerstin writes about in her chapter with privacy and of course data protection. We have these regulations, and since all my research is focused on trying to investigate what's going on out there, it's becoming more and more difficult to do that because of ethical vetting and everything. So it's very difficult to do this type of research these days. So I'm a bit worried that researchers might choose other research questions because they don't want to go through, the whole mess of being able to do this type of research, because it's very tiresome right now to do this type of research, at least where I'm based. It might be different in other countries, but in Europe I think it has become a lot more difficult to do this type of research. So, but we're still doing it. I hope I won't be afraid of asking the questions I want to ask, but I think there is a slight worry here.
I think we have to. It's essential, this type of research, Pia. I mean, you've been doing digital games-based language learning for years as well. I mean, we're not invading these areas to a heavy extent, but we've got to know what our students are changing, particularly so in the past couple of years. So I think we have a right to find, okay, what type of students have we got here? What are their interests? What are their motivations? There's that word again, motivation, to help us improve the learning experience. My biggest worry, when we tried to come back to this blended learning, was that every perennial problem of, attendance. Is it whose fault? Is they're not engaging in the classes, down to 40% attendance, 30% attendance. What's going on there? Usual question about motivations. Well, what are we doing? What's working? What's not working? And we have to be able to investigate that, Pia.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just speaking into the void.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's difficult, right?
That's perhaps a good... Yeah, please go ahead, Chun. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, can I add something? I think back to the Hayo's question in terms of the future of the research. I think there are two things. One is that a lot of research beyond the classroom, they use the conventional outcomes, look at the relationship between out-of-class language learning with reading, vocabulary learning. But then out-of-class is a special venue which actually brings outcomes which might not be conventional. I think that's something that we may need to focus on.
Very good point.
Exploring the unique aspect of out-of-class learning. And another thing is that even in this book, I think there's a lot of this kind of mentality of out-of-class brings benefits to students. But then at the same time, especially when we talk about out-of-class learning with technology, it's a double-edged sword. It always has unintended consequences. So I think that maybe future research needs to focus more on identifying some of the unintended or hidden consequences of using technology beyond the classroom, and how does that impact people's learning in general and their learning inside the classroom as well. So I think there's a lot of interesting issues that could be explored in the beyond the classroom value.
For sure.
I think that's an excellent
How would you
point.
differentiate between unintended learning and incidental learning? In call research, we've always known that the incidental learning will happen there, But how would you differentiate between them?
When we talk about unintended consequences, it's not about it's more about technology, right? When we talk about technology, when we design a particular application, we have some intended effect on the learners, right? We expect that learners benefit from interacting with this application. But then it also brings some kind of consequences maybe we are not aware of when we design it. So these are what we mean by unintended consequences or the hidden consequences that we actually didn't expect it to have on, but then it actually has that kind of effect on the learners. So I think that's the thing maybe we need to pay more attention to as well.
What Chun said, exploring the unique aspects of language learning and teaching and supporting learners beyond the classroom. I think that's a really nice way of encapsulating essentially what a research agenda and a practice agenda for the coming years needs to continue to do, and what we hope that this handbook has kind of provided a little bit of a little bit of an overview or blueprint for researchers and teachers for the future, because what happens in the digital wilds or beyond the classroom is unique. Of course, primarily because every learner is unique and their contexts are unique and the ways that they learn are unique. And we need a lot more understanding of those unique aspects, as Chun put it. Having said that, with the 30 chapters in this handbook and the excellent work that the authors have done, I think we've made a good step in the right direction. We can continue to explore the chocolate towers, the Jurassic Parks, and all the other interesting environments that lie ahead of us. So we've been talking for almost an hour, so I'd like to wrap it up. I'd like to thank first and foremost our authors again for their hard work and for taking all our feedback and comments in stride. Thanks also to the people who participated, who attended today in the audience, and those of you watching it at a later date on YouTube. Thanks again to Pia and Chun for being fantastic sports.
Thank you, Hayo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, and let's keep the conversations going. It's important work, so thank you so much. Just a reminder to those of you here on the screen right now, don't close your browser. You can leave the room. You can click leave at the bottom right of your screen, but don't close your entire browser until it's finished uploading the recording. Okay. So thank you again, everybody, so much, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks for the comments also in the chat.
Yes.
Guys, yeah.
Nice seeing everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.